We are now in the 5th of our 9-week series called Reveal, which is about different people in the Bible and a personality system called the Enneagram. Now, it's hard to get it exactly right about what the people in the Bible are because when exploring the Enneagram, it's up to the individual person to determine their type. And we can't ask those people in the Bible what they think they are. We can just look carefully at what they've done and what they've said and hopefully get an idea of who they are, and then maybe through that, see who we relate to. There might be one that we think, that sounds a lot like me, and it might lead us into further determining our own type, which is important to do because when we know who we are, we can love ourselves for who we are, because God already does. And all of us have a little bit of each of those 9 types in us, but there is one type that becomes dominant in each person. So far, we've learned about the prophet Amos, who was an Enneagram 8, the challenger who faced things head on. The peacemaker prophet Jonah, who was an Enneagram 9, the one who ran away. The perfectionist priest Ezra, an Enneagram 1. And Mary Magdalene and the Apostle John, the companion helpers of Jesus, Enneagram 2s. Today's Bible character is Jacob, whose story is found in the book of Genesis. There's some evidence suggesting that Jacob is an Enneagram 3. And Enneagram 3 is related to last week's Enneagram 2 because they're in that same feeling or heart triad. At their best, Enneagram 3s are cooperative, committed, self-accepting, and authentic. Like their helper neighbors, they also desire affirmation. But if they aren't careful, that desire for affirmation can lead them into feeling empty and worthless, alienated from themselves and prone to self-deception. 3s are the achievers. They want to reach their goals and often identify with those goals. They do this because they've learned early in life, for some reason, it's not okay to have their own feelings or identity. So everything they achieve is how they see themselves. They are people who've always been rewarded for their performance, and their fear is that they aren't inherently valued for who they are, they're only valued for what they do. That part about not having one's own identity and being achievement-oriented is something we can see in Jacob. When Jacob was born, he was born as a twin. And even at his birth, he was ready to get ahead in life. In his story in Genesis, we learn that although he was the second-born twin, when he was born, his hand was gripping his brother Esau's heel. And so he was named Jacob, which means he supplants, trying to take someone else's place. Later, Jacob manages to get his brother Esau to sell him Esau's birthright, so that Jacob has the benefits of the firstborn, not Esau. He does this by taking advantage of Esau's hunger and offering him some stew in exchange for the birthright. Later, Jacob also manages, with his mother Rebekah's help, to trick Esau out of his blessing. He pretends to be Esau so that their father Isaac will bless him instead. And after all this, Jacob goes to his uncle Laban in order to find a wife and decides on Laban's younger daughter Rachel. Unfortunately for Jacob, Laban tricks him and has him marry his older daughter, Leah, instead. He then agrees to let Jacob marry Rachel as well, but Jacob has to work 7 years for this. During this time, Jacob figures out a way to ensure that his share of the flock of goats when he leaves ends up being the larger and stronger goats, which enriches himself. Jacob has achieved a lot. Multiple wives, many children, wealth. 3s really can do and achieve great things. They know how to develop themselves and contribute to the world. They are often well thought of and can be quite popular. They can inspire others to be their best. The Enneagram Institute describes the 3 as the stars of human nature, and that people look up to them because of their personal accomplishments. And when I was reading a list of the names of people who are considered Enneagram 3s, we see a lot of athletes like Michael Jordan and Tiger Woods. We see entertainers such as Oprah Winfrey and Arnold Schwarzenegger, and singers like John Bon Jovi and Taylor Swift. These are people who have, by our society's standards, achieved and accomplished a lot in their lives. Let's look at a few of them. Michael Jordan was cut from his high school basketball team and went on to win 6 NBA championships with the Chicago Bulls, and was the first player to be named MVP 3 years in a row. And then the year after he retired from the NBA, decided to give baseball a try for a year. Later, he rejoined the Bulls. In 1999, ESPN named him the Athlete of the Century. He later became a business person, became owner of the Charlotte Hornets, invested in the Miami Marlins, opened 2 health clinics in North Carolina, and donated millions to Hurricane Dorian relief, as well as to fund the fight against Black voter suppression. Tiger Woods won a putting contest against Bob Hope when he was just 2 years old. When he was 15, he was the youngest to win the U.S. Junior Amateur Golf Championship. When he was 16, he competed in his first PGA tournament and was the youngest player to ever do so. He then won 3 U.S. Amateur Golf Championships in a row, and after he turned professional, he kept winning. The Las Vegas Invitational, the Masters, the PGA, the British Open, and then repeated many of those wins over the years. He opened the Tiger Woods Learning Center in Anaheim, California. He's had many endorsements, was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and helped raise over $20 million for coronavirus efforts in a tournament that was the most watched golf telecast in history. Oprah Winfrey was born into poverty in Mississippi, but moved a few times and was raised by her grandmother and her parents at different times in her life. She had a difficult childhood, including abuse, but was intelligent and excelled in school. She learned to read at age 2, skipped kindergarten after telling her teacher she really belonged in 1st grade, and then after that year was promoted to 3rd grade, skipping 2nd. She won a full scholarship to Tennessee State University, and at age 19 was the youngest and the first African American anchor at WTVF TV in Nashville. She won 16 Daytime Emmy Awards for the Oprah Winfrey Show, formed her own production company, started an influential book club, produced movies, started a magazine and a television channel, and became the first African American woman on Forbes magazine's World's Richest People list. She was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, has donated millions of dollars for education and disaster relief, as well as for food insecurity, specifically during this pandemic. Remember what I said earlier about the 3. They are people who've always been rewarded for their performance, and their fear is that they aren't valued for who they are, only for what they do. Look at everything that these 3 people have done, and we admire them for it. We're their fans. We think, wow, look at what they've accomplished. But by being consumers of entertainment, we perpetuate that fear the 3 has, because we really do only know them for what they do, not for who they are. And if we find out something in the media about who they are, it's often scandalous. Rarely is it something positive. Let's look back at our story about Jacob. I think Jacob was always trying to prove himself, always trying to compete with his brother, always trying to be the best, to get ahead and achieve. Jacob, however, typically defaulted to deception in order to do this. That's the measure of an unhealthy 3. However, later on, after Jacob has amassed everything, he returns home and meets up with his brother Esau, the one he'd repeatedly tricked in order to get what Esau had. Before returning, he sends a lot of gifts ahead to Esau. He tells his messengers to state the reason for the gifts is to find favor in Esau's sight. He then sends a second set of gifts instructing his messengers to let Esau know that he's coming soon. The text tells us Jacob's thoughts. He thinks, I may appease him with the present that goes ahead of me, and afterwards I shall see his face. Perhaps he will accept me. Jacob wants Esau to accept him, and the way he tries to make that happen is through showing him and sharing with him all that he has accomplished since they last saw each other. That night, however, before they meet up, Jacob wrestles with someone all through the night until daybreak, not ever giving up and getting a hurt hip in the process. There's that achiever in him again, until he receives a blessing. He believes he has seen God face to face and lived. And now it's time to meet his brother face to face. Sometimes other humans are a little less loving and gracious than God is, so Jacob is pretty nervous. He bows 7 times as he comes close to his brother, and when Esau asks him why he has so many people with him, Jacob explains it's to find favor with Esau. He's still thinking in that unhealthy version of achiever, or so it would seem. After some discussion, he tells Esau that he wants him to accept the gift because God has dealt graciously with me and because I have everything I want. So Jacob is actually now giving this gift not out of trying to prove something, but because he has experienced God's grace. He now knows the healing message that all Enneagram 3s long to hear, that they are loved for themselves, not for what they do or for what they achieve. And in that new mindset, he can then extend that love to others. And Esau's willingness to accept Jacob and his gifts leads to a reconciliation between the two of them. And while they do again part ways, they do so in a renewed relationship. And they come together later once again when their father Isaac dies in order to bury him. Think about what changed Jacob. It was that wrestling match with God all night. Jacob wouldn't give up. God wouldn't give up either. Maybe they're both achievers. It's a weird little story, and it brings up many more questions than answers. But Jacob's wrestling with God and believing he saw God face to face was a turning point. Because when he meets up with Esau, and Esau is loving and forgiving toward him, Jacob says, "To see your face is like seeing the face of God, since you have received me with such favor." For Jacob, Esau's acceptance of him is compared to God. In Esau, Jacob also sees God. Whatever the wrestling with God means, and there are many ideas of what it means, it enabled Jacob to see God in the person that he had deceived and was expecting revenge from. Someone who might even be considered an enemy. It changed his viewpoint and his mindset. He didn't need to be accepted by his achievements anymore. He was able to understand his acceptance for who he was and accept himself. The Enneagram 3 achiever is someone who highly values success. At first for Jacob, success was all of the material goods and wealth he had gained over the years. But I think his true success came in being able to see God in the face of his brother. God was no longer just the person he wrestled with through the night and named a place after. God was visible in another person. Jacob's success in seeing the image of God in his brother is something we should all strive for. This achievement will enable us to be more understanding, more compassionate, more empathetic to all people. While the healing message the 3 needs to hear is that they are loved for themselves, that's also a message we all need to hear. And my prayer today is that we hear and accept that message, and that we go on to share it so that others can hear it for themselves too. Amen.